Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss Boris Johnson's failure to respond to the EU regarding their threat to take legal action over the internal market bill, which seeks to tear up parts of the withdrawal agreement, particularly referring to customs arrangements for Northern Ireland. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, for the second time today, really, it's the Brexit deal tightrope that Boris Johnson seems to be treading that is the focus for discussion. This time we're leaving aside US presidential concerns, although it is still got an Irish flavour because it is still essentially about how you deal with Ireland. It has been said many times over the years, I mean, Brexit isn't really compatible with common sense in general, but it's wholly incompatible with the unique nature of Ireland. For the longest time, people kept saying to the Brexiteers, how are you going to deal with Ireland? Cue the furrowed brows. I don't know what the issue is, sorry. Boris Johnson's plan was to put a customs border down the Irish Sea, cutting off Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK. OK, that works, said the EU. Wait, what? Said the Conservatives. But behind closed doors, Boris Johnson told his MPs that he would tear up the agreement and that there would be no customs border between Britain and Northern Ireland. If the EU want their customs border, he allegedly told them, they can stick it inside Ireland. OK, that works, said his MPs. Then in September, with the EU privately thinking that we were going to have those customs arrangements, even though we were dragging our feet, we didn't seem to be really putting them in place in any great urgency. And, you know, some of his backbenchers privately thinking, oh, he's going to tear it up any moment. We got to September and then he did it. Wait, what? Said the EU. Johnson smiled. Wait, what? Said most of Parliament. Johnson wasn't bothered. Wait, what? Said the United States. What? Said the Conservatives. Why are you guys bothered? You care about this? Yes, they said. Oh, OK, well, that's tough luck. But diplomatic issues aside, what we're talking about here is the UK government breaching international law. Not only that, because, I mean, that's hardly unprecedented, unfortunately, but the government were quite content to admit to breaking the law in Parliament for the public record. And then, just to add another level of WTF, the treaty that the Conservatives are tearing up and destroying the country's credibility over, into the bargain, it's not one that was agreed by a previous government that they were always against. I mean, that's still not good enough. But this is way worse. It's their treaty. It's the treaty that they wrote, campaigned for, won a general election on the back of, and signed into law. Entirely on them. They did it. And now they're trying to tear it up. Now, that aim is not going to be successful anytime soon. The House of Lords is having no truck with it whatsoever, and it will head back to Boris Johnson heavily amended. In fact, those clauses are just, by the looks of it, being removed, completely removed. If Johnson insists on breaking the law in this limited and specific way, he's going to have to wait some time to do so. But the EU were not at all interested in waiting to see how it played out in Parliament, because even if Parliament ultimately rejects this, even if it's just for now, it is still the official government policy not to comply with the treaty freely entered into. It doesn't matter if he can't break it just yet, if he breaks it in a year's time, 2 years' time. As far as the EU are concerned, he still intends to break it. Now, that is reprehensible enough at the best of times. But the EU are currently engaged in intense talks with the UK for a wider deal, a more comprehensive deal. Why would you agree a deal with the UK when they've just announced their intention to break the agreement that you signed with them earlier the same year? I mean, you wouldn't, would you? So the EU wrote to Boris Johnson demanding an explanation as a sort of form of pre-legal action. The deadline for his response was yesterday. Boris Johnson did not respond. Now, the way it's been billed is the Prime Minister has missed the deadline. No, he hasn't. Missing a deadline means, I forgot, sorry, can I hand it in next week? There's no way he forgot. I mean, he may have forgotten. Of course, he's very disorganised. You know, I know Dominic Cummings is rapidly removing competent senior civil servants, but I'm sure there are still some there. And the Prime Minister's office will have been very mindful of the looming deadline and will absolutely have been reminding the Prime Minister about it. If they weren't, if the senior officials now around Downing Street are that bad, then we've got some major troubles ahead beyond this. But for all the talk about fishing, the level playing field, state aid, that sort of thing, American presidents even, it's difficult to see how we get a deal agreed if this issue of the withdrawal agreement isn't settled first. In fact, it's impossible. I gather that in order to get a deal ratified before the end of the year, in other words, in time for the end of the transition period, the real deadline is around mid-November. Now, I don't have an exact date for that. Don't know. But on top of everything else, it would seem that Johnson also needs to clear up at least this legal wrangle as well. Now, on the one hand, you could look at the situation and you go, okay, it could appear that ignoring the pre-legal letter is not the best way to go about getting a deal. The EU hasn't yet announced their, well, to my knowledge anyway, their next move, because the deadline has only just been missed. But they're not just going to go, oh, he didn't respond, shall we leave it then? Yeah, let's leave it. That's not going to happen. So it's going to mean some form of legal action, potentially in the European Court of Justice. Now, with resolution of this issue an absolute prerequisite for a deal, and Johnson refusing to engage in that process, you're basically looking at a situation where you go, well, there's no chance of a deal now, is there? I mean, there's like less than 2 weeks less, potentially about 2 weeks, whatever. However, Boris Johnson, in persuading his MPs to back the measures in the internal market bill, told them that it was essentially a negotiating tactic. There were quite a lot of Conservative MPs not at all happy at the prospect of breaking international law in such a blatant way. But he told them, don't worry, it's just a bluff. Now, if that is the position, and I know how stupid it is to deploy a bluff in negotiations and then make it publicly known that you are bluffing in this way, is not generally accepted wisdom in trade talks. But nobody ever said Johnson knew what he was doing. But the point is that if he genuinely does intend it only as a bargaining chip, then he can easily agree to remove the offending clauses from the bill if the outstanding issues blocking a deal are removed. You know, the reason Boris Johnson hasn't responded to the EU's letter is not because he forgot, or even because he's taken a deliberate stand against them, but just because he hasn't got anything to say right now. There's no defence of the policy. It's not like he can write a letter back to them, explain how it's not breaking the treaty, because it is. He said so. Well, his government has said so. You know, his own government have said it breaks the law. He's had senior legal advisors resign over the issue. The only thing for Johnson to say in any response would be either, yes, sorry, actually, do you know what? We don't actually want to break the law. We know it's a bit naughty, so we're going to behave now and remove those clauses. Or, yeah, we know it's a bit naughty, but that's who we are now, so like it or lump it. One response allows for a deal with the EU, the other does not. So until he decided whether he wants a deal with the EU or not, he doesn't actually know what his response is. If he did decide he wants a deal, or for whatever other reason that he'd like to comply with his own treaty, even if that's without a deal, the process of doing it, I suppose, is fairly straightforward because the House of Lords is removing those clauses anyway. When it comes back to the House of Commons, he can just accept their removal, tell his MPs to vote it through without the treaty-breaking clauses and pass the rest of it into law. The question then would be, what about all those Conservative MPs who he told privately that he'd be tearing up the withdrawal agreement, at least in respect to the Northern Ireland Protocol? And this is the seemingly insoluble part of Brexit for me right now. It's very difficult to read because those hardline Brexiteers who have publicly stated that Boris Johnson promised to tear up the deal aren't really saying much at the moment about it. They're not really saying a lot. And that suggests to me that they believe that Boris Johnson will deliver what they want. They're not worried. They don't feel the need to get involved. They think that Boris Johnson's going to back what they want. What that is, I can't be sure. But the fact is that without abiding fully with the withdrawal agreement, it is impossible to get a deal with the EU or the US. That's a fact. And if he does abide fully with the withdrawal agreement, well, he's certainly going to piss off some Conservative MPs, at least. I'm not going to say the majority, but at least some. But what remains to be seen is how many of them, because the ones we're talking about here, these hardline Brexiteers, are the ones who think absolutely nothing of going into intra-party war over this. But anyway, that's the situation as it is now. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.